If success makes you feel more afraid than happy, if every compliment adds pressure instead of confidence, and if deep inside you keep thinking that one day people will realize you're not as capable as they believe, then you may be experiencing a very specific psychological state. This is not humility and is not a lack of ability. It is the constant rejection of your own achievements, the belief that everything you've accomplished is due to luck, timing, or other people's mistakes. Some people fail because they don't try hard enough, but others perform well, advance quickly, and still live with the fear that they are merely playing the role of someone competent. What makes this state dangerous is that it doesn't come from external criticism, but from the way the brain interprets success, failure, and self-worth. Psychology calls this pattern imposter syndrome, and to understand why it so often targets capable people, we need to examine how the brain quietly convinces you that you don't deserve what you've earned. At the core of imposter syndrome is not what you achieve, but how your brain interprets those achievements. When someone with a healthy mindset succeeds, the brain attributes that success to ability, effort, and learning. But in people experiencing imposter syndrome, this process is reversed. Every achievement is quickly dismissed and credited to external factors, luck, easy circumstances, perfect timing, or other people's generosity. You strip yourself of ownership over your own success. Meanwhile, even a small mistake, mild criticism, or less than perfect result is immediately attributed to your character as proof that you are fundamentally not good enough. This distorted interpretation creates a dangerous cycle. Before each new challenge, fear of being exposed takes over, leading either to avoidance and procrastination or to extreme over-preparation and exhaustion. When success eventually comes, there is no joy, only relief that you haven't been exposed yet. And because you believe the success was accidental, the anxiety grows even stronger the next time. Over time, the brain trains you to believe that you are surviving on luck, even though your progress has been built on consistent effort. This is why imposter syndrome so often targets capable people. They are deeply aware of what they don't know, and they use that awareness to invalidate everything they do know. Imposter syndrome rarely appears suddenly in adulthood. In most cases, its seeds are planted much earlier, when you are still a child learning how to define your own worth. Many people grow up in environments where intelligence and achievement become part of their identity. When you are praised as naturally smart or gifted, you slowly learn to believe that your value lies in performing well with ease. Then, when challenges arise, when effort is required or mistakes happen, the brain panics, because those experiences contradict the image of effortless competence you were given. At the same time, if love and approval from adults were closely tied to good results, you internalized a dangerous belief: you are only valuable when you succeed. From this point on, the fear of being exposed as incompetent is no longer about ability. It becomes a fear of losing acceptance, connection, and love. As you grow older, even when you perform well and achieve more, the child inside you is still trying to play the role correctly, because deep down you believe that if you are not exceptional, you may no longer deserve to belong. As imposter syndrome persists, it does more than create self-doubt. It quietly produces an internal conflict. On one side, you construct and maintain the image of a competent, reliable person who consistently performs well in the eyes of others. On the other side, there exists an internal version of you that feels anxious, insecure, and afraid of making mistakes, constantly sensing that you are not enough and hiding something. The gap between who you present to the world and who you feel yourself to be grows wider over time, and that gap is where the feeling of being an imposter takes root. You don't feel like you're lying to others, but you feel as though you're living inside a role that can never be dropped. The more you try to maintain a flawless image, the more energy you spend suppressing the very human parts of yourself. Gradually, you stop learning out of curiosity or growth and start acting purely to prevent the role from collapsing. This is why many high achievers end up exhausted, empty, and disconnected from themselves, even though from the outside they appear to be doing everything right. One of the most confusing aspects of imposter syndrome is that self-doubt often appears most intensely in people who are genuinely capable. The more you learn and the broader your understanding becomes, the more aware you are of how complex the world is and how small your own knowledge still feels. That awareness naturally leads to caution, humility, and constant self-questioning. Ironically, the brain misinterprets this awareness as proof that you are not good enough. Meanwhile, those with less understanding are often unaware of their limitations and therefore feel confident with little friction. This is why feeling not enough is not necessarily a sign of incompetence, but often a sign of an expanding mind. The problem begins when healthy doubt turns into a verdict on your worth, when you no longer allow yourself to learn, to make mistakes, or to be unfinished. At that point, doubt stops being a tool for growth and becomes an invisible cage that keeps you trapped in fear. To move out of imposter syndrome, you don't need to force confidence or prove that you're better than others. The first shift isn't about fixing yourself, it's about changing how you see yourself. For years, you may have measured your worth through outcomes, achievements, and other people's reactions. When results are good, you feel acceptable. When things are imperfect, you feel flawed. But human worth doesn't operate by that logic. Ability can fluctuate, performance can rise and fall, but your value doesn't disappear because of a mistake or a slower phase. When you allow yourself to see who you are as someone who is learning, rather than someone who must always be right, pressure begins to loosen. You no longer need to hide what you don't know or perform competence at all times. And it is within this safer internal space that genuine learning and sustainable growth can finally take place. Once you understand the mechanism and origins of imposter syndrome, the next step isn't to think more, but to change how you respond to your own thoughts. The first crucial practice is learning to separate feelings from facts. There will be moments when you feel incompetent, but feelings are not evidence. Facts live in what you've done, the skills you've built, and the concrete results you consistently overlook. The second step is to acknowledge effort, not just outcomes. When you only validate yourself through success, the brain continues to fear failure. But when you learn to recognize the process, you teach your brain that worth does not disappear because of a mistake. Finally, learn to see the self-doubting voice in your mind as a familiar reaction rather than an absolute truth. You don't need to eliminate it, you only need to notice it and allow yourself to act even while it's present. These small, quiet, repeated shifts gradually weaken the imposter loop and restore a sense of inner stability. After everything we've explored, perhaps the most important thing to remember is this: you are not an imposter. You are not the result of random luck either. You are the accumulation of quiet effort, repeated attempts, and moments of self-doubt in which you kept moving forward anyway. Imposter syndrome convinces you that your worth exists only when you are perfect, mistake-free, and constantly meeting other people's expectations. But the truth is, no one grows without confusion, and no one learns without feeling inadequate at times. When you allow yourself to be a person who is learning rather than a role you must maintain, the weight begins to lift. You don't need to eliminate fear in order to move forward. You only need to carry it with honesty. This world does not need more flawless individuals. It needs real people. People who feel fear, who question themselves, who keep learning, and who still choose not to abandon who they are. You may never completely escape moments of self-doubt, and that doesn't mean you're returning to where you started. Psychological maturity is not a permanent state you reach and keep, but the ability to notice doubt and still choose to live, learn, and act with awareness. When you stop treating uncertainty as an enemy, it loses its power over you. Instead of asking whether you are good enough to move forward, you begin to ask whether you are honest enough to admit that you are still learning. And it is that honesty that forms the foundation of lasting confidence. Life does not require you to feel worthy before taking the next step. It only asks that you be courageous enough to take the step even when the feeling of worthiness hasn't arrived yet. Once you understand this, imposter syndrome stops feeling like a sentence hanging over your head and becomes a signal that you are entering a new zone of growth. If there is one thing you should carry with you after this journey, it is a simple but difficult truth. You do not need to become someone else to deserve where you are. You don't need to be better than yesterday to be allowed to exist today. Your worth is not defined by constant confidence, flawless performance, or uninterrupted success, but by your ability to stay with yourself even when doubt arises. Imposter syndrome convinces you that peace is only allowed once you become perfect. But real maturity begins when you understand that you can feel afraid, uncertain, and still learning and remain fully valid. You don't need to wait until you feel worthy to move forward. It is the act of moving forward, even while trembling, that slowly creates the sense of worthiness you've been waiting for.